What kind of man smiles while threatening a legacy? The warehouse smelled of oil and old metal. Four men knelt on concrete that still held the day's heat. Their wrists were bound. Their faces were bruised. And in front of them stood a woman barely 5'3", her boots quiet against the floor, her breathing steady. Caitlin Morrison did not look like vengeance. She looked like someone's daughter. Brown hair tied back, flannel shirt, jeans. An M4 held low, controlled, familiar in her hands. "Break it," she said softly. Marcus Brennan flinched at the words. "What were your exact words?" she asked, voice calm, almost gentle. "When you shattered my grandfather's rifle." He swallowed blood and pride together. "We were wrong." "That's not what you said." Her eyes were not angry. They were measured, cold with memory. But the story didn't start here. It started 72 hours earlier, and 15 years before that. It started the morning four men walked into Morrison's armory and decided a small woman could be bullied. It started the day her grandfather died. The bell above the shop door had chimed like it always did. Nevada sunlight crawled over the eastern hills. Kat had unlocked the door at 7 sharp, routine anchoring her to normalcy. 5-mile run before dawn, push-ups, sit-ups. Discipline didn't retire just because she had. Her grandfather's Remington 700 hung on the wall. Brazilian walnut, smooth from decades of hands that respected it. On the receiver, engraved words, "Break barriers, not promises." She touched it the way other people might touch a gravestone. When the men entered, the air shifted. Marcus Brennan, Dwight Kruger, Trent Blackwood, Silas Vaughn. They didn't come to buy, they came to acquire. 50,000, Marcus had said, smiling without warmth. "For your property." "It's not for sale." Dwight's laugh was thick and ugly. They underestimated her because she was small, because she was alone, because she ran a gun shop in the desert instead of wearing medals on her chest. When Marcus nodded, Dwight grabbed the Remington from the wall. She moved. Trent caught her arm, twisted. Silas pinned her other side. "Break it," Marcus said casually. The crack of splintering walnut echoed like a gunshot. 40 years of memory shattered in 2 seconds. She did not cry. That was what scared Marcus most. Not the scream that tore from her throat, not the struggle. It was the moment after. When she went still. When her eyes changed. Not grief. Calculation. They left her with fragments on the floor and a threat for next week. She knelt, gathered every piece of wood like it was bone. Then she made a call she had sworn never to make again. "Commander," she said when the line connected, "they've come." On the other end, Commander Judith Blackwell listened and told her something that split the past open. Her grandfather had filed a report 2 weeks before his death about weapons moving through channels they never should have touched, about corruption tied to men who wore uniforms and smiles. The official cause of death had been heart attack. But blood work never lies forever. There had been inconsistencies. Poison that mimicked cardiac arrest. For 15 years, Kat had mourned a natural death. Now grief sharpened into something else. "Truth. Do you want to know what really happened?" Blackwell asked. Kat looked at the broken rifle. "Yes." By noon the next day, her uncle Nathaniel Morrison had driven through the night. A retired Marine, a man who had served beside her grandfather. He didn't speak much when he saw the splintered walnut. His jaw tightened, his eyes went distant. "Tell me their names." Rebecca Dalton arrived next, former Army intelligence, discharged for refusing an unlawful order, sharp mind, sharper conscience. Dr. Edmund Sterling came with slow steps and steady hands, the medic who had known her grandfather longer than most men knew themselves. And finally, Special Agent Garrett Holloway of the FBI, cautious but listening. They built a plan not from rage, but from patience. Kat would call Marcus, say she would sell. She would wear a transmitter sewn into her jacket lining, a tracker embedded in her boot. Uncle Nate would be on overwatch. The FBI would position outside. No reckless heroics, no vigilante fantasy. Just truth. When she dialed Marcus, she let fear tremble in her voice. "I'll sell," she said. He sounded pleased. They met at the Dusty Ridge bar. He brought cash, threats, smug confidence. But he also brought something unexpected. Colonel Randolph Vance, a decorated veteran, Medal of Honor, a man whose photograph once hung beside her grandfather. He sat across from her, with the ease of someone who believed history would protect him. "Your grandfather was a good man," Vance said, "but he misunderstood the bigger picture." "Did he?" she asked. "He tried to be a hero." "And you?" His smile thinned. He didn't confess outright. He didn't need to. The arrogance was there, the implication, the quiet admission that some men believed themselves untouchable. Kat walked out with more questions and one certainty. This wasn't about land. It was about silence. And Vance had been protecting something for 15 years. The next night she made a riskier move. "I don't want 50,000, she told Marcus. "I want in." If they believed she was greedy, she could get closer. If they believed she was broken, she could see behind the curtain. They told her to come to an abandoned industrial complex outside town. "Come alone." At 8 p.m., she drove into darkness. Inside the warehouse were crates, military markings, stolen weapons, enough firepower to arm a small war. Vance stood in the center like a general inspecting troops. "You want to work for us?" he asked. "Yes." "Why should I trust you? Your grandfather believed in rules." "Rules didn't save him," she said evenly. Then Marcus raised a pistol to her head. "You think we didn't check you," Vance said calmly. "Former SEAL, multiple deployments, Silver Star. You really thought you could walk in here unnoticed?" Her heart pounded, but her voice held. "You killed him." "Prove it." She played the recording from the bar. His own voice filled the warehouse. Silence followed. Then he laughed. "Any decent lawyer will bury that." He turned to Marcus. "Kill her." Outside, 1,200 yards away, Nathaniel Morrison lay prone on a ridge. He saw the movement, saw the muzzle lift. He had been ordered to wait. He had obeyed orders his entire life. He thought of his brother in an armchair, of a letter never delivered. He exhaled. The shot was clean. Marcus fell before the echo reached the walls. Chaos erupted. Kat moved on instinct, disarm, drop low, control space. FBI vehicles stormed in seconds later. Dwight on the ground, Trent zip-tied, Silas wounded but alive. And Vance standing still, hands raised, expression unbroken. "You just ruined your life," he told her quietly. "No," she replied. "You did that 15 years ago." 3 months later, the courtroom was silent when the verdict came down. Guilty. On conspiracy. On murder. On trafficking. The medal would be revoked. The name removed from honor rolls. But none of that brought her grandfather back. After the cameras faded and reporters chased louder stories, Kat returned to the shop. The broken rifle had been replaced with a custom Remington 700 built in its image. New walnut. New engraving. She broke barriers and kept promises. In honor of Master Chief William Morrison. Nathaniel stood beside her. "What now?" he asked. She looked around the small shop, at the bell above the door, at the desert stretching endless and patient beyond the windows. "I stay," she said. "I do it right." Later, Doc handed her a sealed letter written years before. If you're reading this, Catbird, then I failed to stop something. But don't become like them. Do it legal, do it with honor. Break barriers, but keep your promises. She folded the letter carefully. He had known. And still he chose truth. She understood then what strength really was. Not the trigger pull. Not the confrontation. Not even the victory. It was restraint. It was refusing to let anger define the ending. Back in the warehouse, the four men who once laughed now knelt under flickering light. She looked at them, not with rage but with clarity. "You didn't need to know who I was," she said quietly. "You just needed to not be animals." She lowered the rifle. Outside, dawn was breaking over Nevada. The desert did not cheer. It did not judge. It simply endured. And so did she. Because sometimes justice is not loud. Sometimes it doesn't roar. Sometimes dignity doesn't speak at all. It simply acts. Why did the desert feel quieter the morning after they broke her? Caitlin Morrison had not slept. She sat on the floor of Morrison's armory with splinters of Brazilian walnut arranged in a careful line across the counter. Each piece of the Remington 700 was placed as if it could still be whole if she respected it enough, if she remembered it enough. The sunrise bled slowly through the dusty front windows, pale gold, indifferent. Her chest ached, but not in the way she expected, not loud grief, not tears. It was something heavier, a question she had never asked before. What if Grandpa hadn't died of a heart attack? The thought felt disloyal at first, like accusing the world of something too ugly to be true. For 15 years she had accepted the story. 77 years old, quick and painless, a good life, a peaceful end. But men who believed in peace didn't get their rifles shattered in retaliation for land. And men who ran arms through Nevada didn't knock politely before they took what they wanted. Her phone lay on the counter. Commander Blackwell's voice from the night before echoed in her head. Inconsistencies in the bloodwork, tissue samples consistent with certain cardiac glycosides. Digitalis can mimic heart failure. Kat pressed her palms flat against the wood. Anxiety crept in, not fear of Marcus Brennan. Fear of the truth. If her grandfather had been murdered, then every quiet holiday, every anniversary she had spent believing fate had simply taken him, had been built on a lie. She rose slowly, shoulders squaring. Emotion was a current, training was an anchor. She locked the shop doors, flipped the sign to closed. Then she dialed Marcus. He answered on the second ring. "Miss Morrison, I was wondering when you'd call." She let her voice shake, not too much, just enough. "I've been thinking." "That's dangerous," he chuckled. "You win," she said. "I'll sell." A pause. Satisfaction traveled through the line like heat. "Smart girl." They agreed to meet the following night at the Dusty Ridge Bar, 8 p.m. cash, deed in hand. When she ended the call, her reflection stared back from the cracked glass cabinet behind the counter. Small. Ordinary. Green eyes too calm. Ignored. The word surfaced unexpectedly. All those years in the teams she had been underestimated at first glance. Too small, too young, too quiet, until the first range day, until the first mission brief, until the first time she corrected a mistake no one else saw. Her grandfather had taught her that. "Let them think what they want, Catbird," he used to say. "The hawk doesn't announce itself, it waits." By noon, the safe house was alive with quiet purpose. Nathaniel spread topographic maps across the dining table. Rebecca worked 3 screens at once, pulling satellite imagery of the bar, cross-referencing vehicle registrations. Agent Holloway paced, phone to ear, negotiating resources he wasn't supposed to promise. Doc Sterling brewed coffee strong enough to strip paint. Kat stood in the center of it all. Listening. absorbing, feeling something strange stir beneath the grief. Determination. They'll search you, Nathaniel said without looking up. They won't expect high-tech, Rebecca replied. She held up a wafer-thin transmitter. Military grade, heat signature minimal. I'll stitch it into your jacket lining. Garrett exhaled slowly. If they suspect you're wired. They won't, Kat said. But doubt flickered in her mind. Not about her ability. About her control. Facing men who had shattered something sacred, restraint would be harder than pulling a trigger. Doc handed her a mug. Drink. She took it. Kat, he added gently, you don't have to carry this alone. She almost smiled. That's the only way I know how. Silence followed. Rebecca broke it. There's more. All eyes turned. I dug deeper into Vance. Decorations check out. Career spotless. But 6 months before your grandfather died, there were internal inquiries into supply discrepancies at Nellie's. They disappeared. Disappeared how? Nathaniel asked. Classified and sealed, fast. Garrett's jaw tightened. That's not standard procedure. No, Rebecca agreed. It's damage control. The room went still. Kat felt her pulse steady, not spike. Anger was easier than grief. If Vance had silenced her grandfather, then breaking the rifle wasn't intimidation. It was arrogance. Tomorrow night, she said quietly, we get him talking. Garrett nodded. We need more than implication. We need language, direct ties, a slip. He'll slip, Nathaniel murmured. Men like that always do. They think their history shields them. That evening, Kat returned briefly to the shop. Alone. She stood beneath the empty hooks where the Remington once hung. Her fingers traced the faint outline left in dust on the wall. Why didn't you tell me? She whispered. The question wasn't accusation. It was longing. He had written everything down in notebooks she still kept locked in a drawer. Range logs, maintenance notes, old letters. Had she missed something? She unlocked the drawer and pulled one free. Flipped pages. Found an entry dated October 18, 2011. Met with NCIS contact today. Not what I expected. Higher than anticipated. If this escalates, Kat must never be involved. Her breath caught. Escalates. He had known. He had seen something. And he had tried to shield her from it. The realization hollowed her out. For years she had believed she'd walked away from the teams to build something quieter, something safe. Now she understood. He had tried to build her a future untouched by corruption. And they had taken that from him. Her phone buzzed. Rebecca, need you back. We're doing a dry run. She closed the notebook carefully. One last look at the empty wall. Then she locked the shop and drove. At the safe house, they rehearsed everything. How she would enter. Where she would sit. What phrases might prompt response. Garrett played Marcus. Nathaniel played Vance. Rebecca interrupted when answers weren't sharp enough. Too emotional, she warned once. Let them underestimate you. I know, Kat replied. But inside, she was wrestling something deeper. Not fear of dying. Fear of losing control. If Vance confirmed it, if he admitted it even partially, would she stay within the lines? Her grandfather's voice drifted back through memory. Honor isn't about what you feel, Catbird. It's about what you do with it. Later, alone in the spare bedroom, she lay staring at the ceiling. Her muscles were tired. Her mind was ignored, broken, determined. 3 emotions tangled together. She had built her identity around discipline, around purpose. But this mission wasn't an overseas operation with clear objectives and exit strategies. This was personal. And personal blurred edges. She turned on her side and opened her phone. Scrolled to the last photo she had of him. He stood behind the counter, the Remington cradled in his hands, smiling like the desert sun had never touched him. "I'm not doing this for revenge," she whispered to the empty room. "I'm doing it because you were right." Outside, wind moved through dry brush, soft, restless. In the distance, a train horn echoed across the valley. Time moving forward. Whether she was ready or not. Back at Morrison's armory, fluorescent lights hummed over empty racks. In a warehouse 15 miles away, men counted crates they believed untouchable. And somewhere between those 2 points, Caitlin Morrison prepared to walk into a room with the man who might have poisoned her grandfather and ask him to talk. Not because she needed to hear it, but because justice required proof. She closed her eyes, forced herself to breathe in slow, even counts. Tomorrow, she would sit across from Marcus Brennan. Tomorrow, she would let them think she had surrendered. Tomorrow, she would step into their world willingly. But there was something she hadn't told the team. Not yet. If Vance admitted everything, if the opportunity presented itself, she didn't know which part of her would answer. The granddaughter, or the operator. And that uncertainty frightened her more than any gun ever could. What do you say to the man who might have signed your grandfather's death warrant? The dusty Ridge Bar looked exactly like the kind of place people disappeared in. Faded neon flickering against cracked stucco, a parking lot littered with gravel and old oil stains, windows so coated in dust the outside world felt optional. Caitlin Morrison arrived 15 minutes early. She sat in her truck with the engine off, hands resting lightly on the steering wheel. The transmitter stitched into her jacket lining felt heavier than it was. The secondary tracker in her boot pressed against her heel with every small shift of her foot. Her phone vibrated once. Nathaniel in position, ridge northwest, clear line of sight. Another buzz. Rebecca, audio check. Kat coughed twice, then once. Rebecca's voice came through the tiny bone conduction receiver hidden against the back of her ear. Clear. We've got you. Garrett's message followed. FBI unit staged 5 minutes out. We move only if necessary. Necessary. That word always carried weight. She stepped out of the truck and locked it without looking back. Marcus Brennan stood outside the bar entrance like he owned the place. Black button-down, expensive boots, smile sharp enough to cut. "Miss Morrison," he said warmly, "right on time." "Let's keep this simple," she replied. Inside, the bar smelled like stale beer and old wood. A handful of locals hunched over drinks, eyes deliberately unfocused. The bartender wiped the same glass twice without ever glancing up. Marcus led her to a booth in the back. Dwight Trent Silas. Clean shirts, clean hands. Violence still clung to them. Kat slid into the booth, back straight, shoulders relaxed. Marcus placed a metal briefcase on the table and popped the latches. $50,000 in banded hundreds. "Count it if you want," he said. She didn't touch it. "I trust you." His eyes narrowed slightly, evaluating. "Good," he said, "because trust goes both ways." He leaned forward. "You understand that once this deal is done, you keep quiet. No regrets, no calls, no loose ends." "I understand." Dwight's gaze lingered on her jacket. Trent shifted in his seat. Then Marcus's tone changed. "Before we finalize," he said casually, "maybe we should make sure you're not wearing anything you shouldn't." The air thickened. Kat's pulse rose, not visibly, not in her breathing but in her ears. Rebecca's whisper came through the receiver, "Stay calm." Dwight stood. "Up," Marcus said softly. She rose slowly, arms slightly out, chin level. Dwight's hands moved over her sides, professional in their own crude way, searching for wires, bulges, hard edges. He found her phone, checked it, tossed it back onto the table. Keys, wallet. Nothing else. The transmitter was woven so thin into the seam of her jacket lining, it felt like fabric. Dwight stepped back. She's clean. Kat sat again. Inside, adrenaline coursed sharp and electric. Outside, she remained still. Marcus smiled. Sorry about that, can't be too careful. Understandable, she said evenly. He studied her face a beat too long. You're not what I expected. No. No tears, no yelling. Most people get sentimental when family's involved. She held his gaze. Sentiment doesn't fix anything. A flicker of something, respect, suspicion, crossed his expression. Then a new voice spoke from behind her. She's right. Cold. Measured. Older. Kat turned slowly. Colonel Randolph Vance stepped into the dim light. Silver hair, polished shoes, a casual polo shirt that probably cost more than her monthly rent. On his collar, a small Medal of Honor pin caught the glow of a hanging lamp. He moved like a man accustomed to command. Caitlin Morrison, he said smoothly, I was hoping we'd meet. The room shrank. In her ear, Rebecca whispered, we're recording. Stay steady. Kat didn't stand. She didn't extend her hand. Colonel. He slid into the booth beside her without invitation. Marcus and his men gave space instantly. Hierarchy made visible. I knew your grandfather, Vance said conversationally. William Morrison, remarkable man. Her throat tightened, not visibly but deep. He spoke of you, Vance continued, often. That's interesting, she said carefully, because he never mentioned you. A faint smile curved his mouth. That doesn't surprise me. Silence stretched. The jukebox in the corner hummed through an old country song no one listened to. Vance leaned back. Let's skip the formalities, he said. You're selling your land, that's wise, but I sense you have questions. Yes. Ask. Why did you poison him? The words burned against her teeth. Instead, she said, why is my property important? Vance's fingers laced together loosely. Strategic value, remote access, proximity to certain corridors. That's not specific. His gaze sharpened. You're not as naive as Marcus hoped. I run a gun shop, she replied. I notice patterns. He studied her for a long moment. Then he sighed almost theatrically. Your grandfather noticed patterns too. There it was. The hook. What kind, she asked. Vance's tone cooled slightly. Ones that didn't concern him. In what way? He misunderstood certain operational necessities. Necessities, she repeated. Yes. Like moving stolen weapons through military channels. Marcus shifted uncomfortably. Dwight's jaw clenched. Vance did not flinch. You're making serious accusations. I'm asking questions. And what if the answers aren't ones you can live with? Her heart pounded once hard, then steadied. I've lived with a lie for 15 years, she said quietly. I can handle truth. His eyes flickered at that. Truth, he echoed. He leaned closer, voice lowering. Your grandfather filed a report he shouldn't have filed. He believed rules were absolute, black and white. He never understood the gray. And the gray required him dead, she asked. The booth went silent. Marcus's breathing slowed. Vance's expression didn't change, but something in his eyes hardened. Heart attacks happen, he said. To healthy men, she pressed. To men under stress, he corrected. Rebecca's whisper, push, carefully. You were there 2 weeks before he died, Kat said. Photographs from a retirement ceremony. You looked close. We were. So what changed? Perspective, Vance replied. He chose a hill that wasn't worth dying on. The sentence hung heavy. Kat felt something crack inside her, not outwardly, but deep. You're admitting he died because of a report. I'm saying, Vance said calmly, that stubborn men often invite consequences. The bar felt smaller, the air thinner. In her ear, Garrett's voice was tight. That's close, keep him talking. You respected him, she asked. Yes. And still. Vance's jaw tightened almost imperceptibly. Patriotism isn't sentiment, Miss Morrison. Sometimes protecting a country requires sacrifice. His sacrifice, she whispered. Our sacrifice, he corrected. You're running weapons, she said. That's not patriotism. He tilted his head slightly. Perspective, he repeated. She felt anger surge, sharp and dangerous. But she held it. Because rage would end this too soon. And what about now, she asked. What happens after I sell? You live quietly, he said. You stay out of matters beyond your comprehension. And if I do? His smile faded. Then you risk repeating family history. There it was. A thread. Clear enough to record. Clear enough to understand. Rebecca's voice trembled slightly. We've got enough for probable cause, Garrett. But Kat wasn't finished. You broke his rifle, she said softly. Marcus blinked. What? My grandfather's rifle. You ordered it broken. Marcus looked confused. Vance glanced at him. I did not give that order, Vance said coolly. Marcus stiffened. Boss. You acted without instruction, Vance continued, voice now edged with steel. Dwight swallowed. Trent looked down. Kat watched it unfold, power shifting, blame redirecting. Even among criminals, hierarchy demanded discipline. Vance looked back at her. That was unnecessary. The irony almost made her laugh. Unnecessary, she repeated. Yes. Silence pressed in again. She saw it then, the flaw. Vance believed himself justified. Not guilty. That arrogance would be his undoing. He rose smoothly from the booth. You have 24 hours to finalize the sale, he said. After that, options narrow. He paused, studying her face. You look like him, he added softly. Don't make his mistakes. He walked out without another word. Marcus stared after him, unsettled. Then he shoved the briefcase closer to her again. Take the money, he muttered. Trust me. She stood. I need a day, she said. Marcus's eyes darkened. We've been patient. And you'll be patient one more time, she replied, letting her voice waver just slightly. Or you lose the land entirely. A beat. Then he nodded. 24 hours, that's it. Outside, night air hit her lungs like a reset. She walked to her truck steadily. Didn't rush. Didn't look back. Only when she was 3 blocks away did her hands begin to tremble. Nathaniel's truck pulled up beside her moments later. He stepped out and opened her door without speaking. She stepped into his arms. He knows, she whispered. I've heard, he replied quietly. He didn't deny it. That's enough to move. But she pulled back slightly, searching his face. What if it's not, she asked. What if men like him always slip through? Nathaniel's eyes softened and hardened all at once. Then we keep pushing. Back at the safe house, Rebecca replayed the audio over and over. Garrett coordinated warrants. Doc placed a steady hand on Kat's shoulder. You did well, he said. But she didn't feel victorious. She felt exposed. Because beneath the mission, beneath the evidence, beneath the legal strategy, there was something she hadn't told them. Not yet. When Vance leaned close and spoke about sacrifice, part of her had wanted to reach across the table. Not to arrest him, Not to argue, but to hurt him. That frightened her more than the guns ever could. She stood at the window long after the others had dispersed. The Nevada desert stretched endless and dark. Somewhere in that darkness, Vance was planning his next move. And somewhere deeper inside her, a question waited unanswered. When the moment comes, will you choose justice? Or will you choose revenge? What do you do when the man who might have killed your grandfather invites you deeper into his world? The call came at 3:02 p.m. Caitlin stared at the screen before answering. Unknown number, but she already knew. Miss Morrison, Marcus said smoothly. The boss was intrigued. Her pulse steadied instead of racing. By what? Your questions, your composure. He wants to meet again, somewhere private. How private? A pause. I'll text the address. 8 p.m. Come alone. The line went dead. Rebecca looked up from her laptop. Industrial zone east of town. Abandoned mining complex. Satellite shows recent vehicle activity. Garrett swore under his breath. That's not a business meeting. That's containment. Nathaniel's jaw tightened. Or an execution. Kat didn't speak immediately. She felt something cold settle into place inside her. Not fear, not quite. Clarity. They're testing me, she said quietly. If I don't go, I confirm suspicion. If I do go, I step closer. Closer to what? Doc asked gently. To truth. The room fell silent. Garrett rubbed his temples. If this goes sideways, we won't have the same leverage as last night. You'll be on their ground. I know. Rebecca swiveled her screen toward Kat. There's a main warehouse and 2 secondary structures. Only one clear access road. If you're inside, we'll have limited visuals. Nathaniel looked at her. You don't have to do this. The words were soft, protective, almost pleading. For a second, just one, she wanted to say yes. Wanted to admit she was tired. Tired of pretending. Tired of holding herself together. Tired of carrying 15 years of grief that suddenly felt heavier. But she saw her grandfather's handwriting in her mind. Don't let anger turn you into them. I have to, she said. Because if she stepped back now, Vance would vanish behind lawyers and layers of deniability. Because if she didn't push, her grandfather would remain a footnote. Because being ignored had always fueled her more than being challenged. They prepared in silence. Rebecca upgraded the transmitter, added a biometric spike alert tied to Kat's heart rate. Garrett staged FBI units farther out this time, hidden, waiting for a signal that might come too late. Nathaniel chose a ridge 1,200 yards north of the complex. Wind patterns shift after sundown, he murmured, studying his scope adjustments. But I'll have clean lines. Only if you have to, Kat reminded him. He didn't answer. At 7:35 p.m. she drove out alone. The road narrowed as desert swallowed streetlights. The mining complex rose from the darkness like a skeleton, rusted metal, broken windows, steel beams silhouetted against a purple sky. 3 vehicles were parked outside. Marcus's truck, a black Mercedes, a white panel van. She stepped out of her truck slowly, every sense alert. Marcus emerged from the warehouse doorway. Right on time, he said, no smile this time. Inside, fluorescent lights hummed overhead. Rows of wooden crates lined the floor. Military stencils. Serial numbers. She recognized them instantly. M4 carbines, M249 saws, AT4 launchers. Enough stolen hardware to destabilize more than one border. Vance stood in the center of it all, hands clasped behind his back, like he was inspecting inventory at a hardware store. Miss Morrison, he said warmly, welcome. She let her eyes widen just slightly, Let curiosity replace judgment. You weren't exaggerating, she said. We rarely do. Marcus stayed close behind her. Too close. You said you wanted in, Vance continued. Explain why. This was the moment. She exhaled slowly. Because I'm tired of losing, she said. The words felt dangerous, not because they were untrue, but because they were. My grandfather died broke. The system he believed in didn't protect him. I run a shop that barely stays afloat. You move product worth millions through my backyard. If I'm going to live in the gray, I'd rather profit from it. The lie tasted bitter, but she held his gaze. Vance studied her like a chess player studying a piece. And loyalty, he asked, where does yours lie? With whoever wins, she replied. Marcus shifted behind her. Rebecca's whisper came through faint and tight. Careful, he's probing. Vance circled slowly. You don't strike me as greedy, he said. I'm practical. And if I told you your grandfather died because he refused to be practical? Her stomach tightened. You'd have to be more specific, she said evenly. He stopped in front of her. You think this is about money? He asked, gesturing to the crates. This is about leverage, influence, control, government's posture, military's posture, but real power belongs to those who understand supply. You poisoned him, she said quietly. Marcus stiffened. Vance's eyes cooled. Careful. Didn't you? The warehouse felt smaller. Rebecca whispered, Cat, don't escalate too fast. But Cat couldn't stop. Digitalis, she continued softly. Slow, controlled, undetectable to anyone who isn't looking. Silence. Even Marcus looked unsettled now. Vance didn't deny it. He didn't confirm it. He simply regarded her. Your grandfather saw something he shouldn't have, he said finally. He chose exposure over discretion. And you chose elimination over accountability. Marcus's hand moved. Metal scraped softly. A pistol appeared at the edge of her peripheral vision. There it was. The shift. You think we didn't research you? Vance asked calmly. Petty Officer First Class Caitlin Morrison, Naval Special Warfare Development Group, 2 tour Syria, 3 Afghanistan, Silver Star. Her heart rate spiked. Rebecca's voice sharpened. Abort, abort now. I don't hide my past, Kat replied. No, Vance said, but you hide your intent. Marcus pressed the barrel of the gun lightly against her temple. Not hard. Just enough. You came here wired, Vance said. Dwight stepped forward. Trent and Silas emerged from shadows she hadn't seen. They had been waiting. Testing. You thought we'd miss it, Vance continued. Her breathing remained even. I'm not wired. Marcus patted down her sides again. Slower this time. More thorough. He searched her jacket seams. Her waistband. Her boots. The transmitter remained invisible. But suspicion had changed the air. She's clean, Marcus said after a long moment. Vance tilted his head. Clean isn't innocent. Garrett's voice cut in low through the receiver. We're 3 minutes out if needed. 3 minutes could be forever. Vance stepped closer. So tell me, he said softly, did you come here for money or revenge? There it was. The question she'd been avoiding. She met his eyes. Justice. He almost smiled. Justice is a story people tell themselves to feel righteous. And what do you tell yourself? She asked. That history remembers winners. He nodded once. Marcus. The pistol pressed harder. Time slowed. On the ridge 1,200 yards away, Nathaniel Morrison lay prone, scope trained steady. Wind slight northeast. Range dialed. finger resting on trigger. He saw the gun rise. He heard Garrett's command in his earpiece. "Stand down, wait." But Nathaniel saw something else. He saw his brother in a retirement chair. He saw a funeral flag folded too neatly. He saw Kat at 8 years old, struggling to hold the Remington steady. "Breathe between heartbeats," Billy had told her. Nathaniel exhaled. Inside the warehouse, Vance spoke one final sentence. "Kill her." The shot cracked through desert air. Marcus dropped before his finger could tighten. Silence exploded into chaos. Trent lunged. Kat moved. She dropped low, swept his legs, drove her shoulder into his midsection. Gun skittered across concrete. She kicked it away. Silas reached for another weapon. A second shot rang out. Silas screamed and fell, shoulder shattered but alive. Dwight ran toward the back exit. Warehouse doors burst open. "FBI, drop your weapons." Flashlights blinded. Boots thundered. Shouts overlapped. In less than 15 seconds, it was over. Marcus lay still. Trent face down. Dwight restrained. Silas bleeding but breathing. And Colonel Randolph Vance standing upright, hands raised, face composed. He looked at Kat almost with admiration. "You disappoint me," he said quietly. "No," she replied, chest rising hard now. "You disappoint history." Garrett stepped forward, reading charges as agents cuffed Vance. Conspiracy, trafficking, murder. Vance didn't resist. As they led him past her, he paused. "This won't erase what I did," he said softly, "and it won't erase what you wanted to do." The words hit harder than the gun. Because for a split second, when Marcus lifted that pistol, she had wanted Nathaniel to shoot. Not just to save her, but to punish them. That truth lingered. Outside, red and blue lights cut through desert darkness. Nathaniel approached slowly from the ridge. His face looked older. "I disobeyed orders," he said quietly. "You saved me," she replied. Garrett overheard. "Clean shoot," he said firmly. "Armed suspect, imminent threat." But Kat barely heard. Her ears rang with Vance's last sentence. "It won't erase what you wanted to do." Back at the safe house later, as evidence was cataloged and statements recorded, Kat stood alone by the window. The desert looked unchanged. Stars indifferent. Wind restless. She felt proud. Relieved. But also shaken. Because justice had prevailed. Yet inside her, something darker had stirred, and she had felt it. She closed her eyes. Breath slow. Her grandfather's voice returned like an anchor. "Do it right." Tonight she had. But the line between justice and revenge was thinner than she ever imagined. And she knew this wasn't over. Not inside her. Not yet. Have you ever won a battle and still felt like you lost something? The morning after the warehouse raid felt unnaturally quiet. No gunfire. No shouted commands. No desert wind slicing through rusted steel. Just sunlight spilling across Caitlin's kitchen table. She sat there in civilian clothes, hands wrapped around a mug of coffee gone cold. Across from her, a folded American flag rested inside its wooden case, her grandfather. The news was already running the story. Decorated retired Colonel Randolph Vance, arrested in federal weapons trafficking investigation. His face flashed across the screen, calm, controlled, almost dignified. Like a man inconvenienced, not exposed. The report didn't mention William Morrison. Not yet. Kat muted the TV. The silence pressed in. For 15 years she had imagined this moment, the truth uncovered, the powerful man brought down, the shadow finally named. She thought it would feel like relief. Instead, it felt like standing at the edge of something she didn't recognize. A knock sounded at the door. Nathaniel. He didn't wear his usual easy grin. "You sleep?" he asked gently. "Not much." He stepped inside, glancing at the TV screen, then at the folded flag. "They're building the case," he said. "Garrett thinks they'll stack conspiracy, trafficking, obstruction, maybe even homicide if the medical review holds." "If," she repeated. He sat across from her. "You did it," he said quietly. She shook her head. "We did." But the words didn't settle right. Nathaniel studied her face. "You're not okay." She hesitated, then nodded once. "I wanted him to suffer," she admitted. The confession felt heavier than the firefight. Nathaniel didn't look shocked. "I know. When Marcus lifted that gun," she continued, voice tightening, "I didn't just want to survive, I wanted them destroyed." Her throat closed around the last word. "I felt it," she said. "That anger, it wasn't clean, it wasn't justice, it was personal." Nathaniel leaned back, exhaling slowly. "Of course it was personal," he said. "They killed your grandfather. That doesn't give me permission to become like them." "No," he agreed softly, "but it makes you human." She stared at the wood grain of the table. "Human." The word felt fragile. Later that afternoon, Garrett called. "They're moving Vance to federal custody in D.C. He's lawyered up, predictably." "Will he walk?" she asked. "Not if the evidence holds." "And if it does?" Garrett paused. "Then we try again." That was the thing about justice. It wasn't cinematic. It didn't close like a door. It lingered. The FBI requested a formal statement from her regarding the warehouse confrontation. She agreed. The room was sterile, bright, recorded. "Did you intend to provoke Colonel Vance into making an admission?" the agent asked. "Yes." "Were you aware your actions could result in lethal force?" "Yes." "Did you desire lethal force?" The question landed like a stone. She swallowed. "No," she said. But it wasn't the full truth. Because desire wasn't simple. It had flickered. Brief. Hot. And gone. The agent studied her for a moment, then nodded. Afterward she drove to the land. The 30 acres Marcus had wanted. Desert brush, a weathered barn, faded fencing. The air smelled like dust and memory. She stepped inside the barn slowly. The broken rifle still hung on the wall. The stock split cleanly down the middle. She approached it like something sacred. For years, it had been a symbol of humiliation, of violation, of someone powerful sending a message. "We can break what you love." She reached up and lifted it down. The wood felt rough beneath her fingers. Her grandfather had taught her to shoot with this rifle. Not to dominate, not to intimidate, but to focus. "Breath between heartbeats," he'd say. She sat on the floor with the broken pieces across her lap. For a moment, anger threatened to rise again. But it didn't. Instead, something else surfaced. Grief. Pure, uncomplicated. She hadn't let herself feel it in years. Because grief meant weakness. And weakness meant vulnerability. And vulnerability meant risk. But sitting there in the dust, holding the cracked wood, she finally let herself cry. Not loudly. Not dramatically. Just quietly. For a man who believed rules mattered. For a girl who lost him too early. For the version of herself that had carried rage like armor. When the tears stopped, she wiped her face and exhaled. Then she did something small. Something deliberate. She stood. Found tools. Carefully began removing the damaged stock. Not to erase the break. Not to pretend it hadn't happened, but to rebuild. Slowly. That evening, Rebecca called. "You planning to sell?" she asked. "No." Rebecca smiled through the phone. "Good. They wanted it for leverage," Kat said, "so I'll keep it for something else." "Like what?" She looked out at the horizon. "Training." Rebecca paused. "You mean?" "For girls who don't get invited to the table," Kat finished softly. Rebecca's voice warmed. "That's very you." Maybe it was. Or maybe it was who she was trying to become. Days passed. The investigation widened. Names surfaced. Accounts froze. The media cycle grew louder. But something inside Caitlin grew quieter. One afternoon, she received a letter. No return address. Inside was a single typed line. "History is written by survivors." No signature. But she knew. Vance. Even in custody, he was reaching. Testing. She folded the letter carefully. Didn't tear it. Didn't burn it. Just placed it inside a drawer beside her grandfather's old field journal. History is written by survivors. Maybe. But survival wasn't the same as integrity. A week later, Nathaniel joined her at the barn. She handed him the rifle, newly fitted with a plain, unfinished stock. Not polished. Not ornate. Just solid. "You fixed it," he said. "No," she replied, "I rebuilt it." He nodded. They stepped outside together. She set up a single steel target 50 yards out. Took position. Inhaled. Exhaled. Waited for the space between heartbeats. Fired. The steel rang clear. Not loud. Not dramatic. Just certain. Nathaniel smiled faintly. "You thinking of re-enlisting?" he asked. She shook her head. "No." "What then?" She lowered the rifle. "Living." He considered that. That might be harder. Probably. But she didn't say it with dread. She said it with resolve. Because justice had been pursued. Truth had been exposed. But redemption, that was quieter. It happened in choices no one applauded. In anger you refused to feed. In power you refused to abuse. That night she stood alone beneath the desert sky. The land stretched wide and unclaimed. The wind moved gently through dry grass. She felt something unfamiliar. Not victory. Not vengeance. Peace. Small. Incomplete. But real. She thought about Vance's words. History remembers winners. Maybe. But she understood something now. History also remembers those who refuse to become what hurt them. Sometimes strength isn't loud. Sometimes it doesn't fire the final shot. Sometimes it simply lowers the weapon and chooses to build instead of break. And in that quiet choice, dignity doesn't shout. It simply stands. What happens after the headlines fade, when the silence is louder than the gunfire ever was? 3 months later, the desert looked the same. Unbothered, endless, honest. Caitlin stood at the edge of the property at sunrise, boots half buried in dust, watching a line of teenage girls step uncertainly through the old gate. Some wore borrowed boots. Some wore sneakers. One clutched a notebook like she'd shown up for the wrong class. None of them looked like they believed they belonged there. Caitlin recognized that look. She had worn it once. Nathaniel leaned against the barn wall, arms folded, pretending not to supervise security. Rebecca stood near a folding table stacked with ear protection and safety glasses, offering quiet smiles. There were no banners. No press. No sponsors. Just a hand-painted wooden sign, hanging crookedly from the barn door. Morrison Range, named not for revenge, but for legacy. Caitlin stepped forward. Her voice wasn't loud. It didn't need to be. "You're not here to learn how to fight," she began. "You're here to learn how to focus." The girls shifted awkwardly. She understood. "Control," she continued, "isn't about dominating someone else. It's about mastering yourself. Breath, posture, choice." Choice. That word mattered more than they knew. Because 3 months earlier, she had stood in a warehouse with a gun to her head and chosen restraint over rage. And she was still choosing it. Every day. The trial began the following week in Washington. Colonel Randolph Vance arrived in a tailored suit, expression composed. Cameras flashed. Commentators debated patriotism versus corruption like it was a sports match. Inside the courtroom, testimony unfolded slowly. Evidence stacked carefully. Emails, financial trails, warehouse inventories, recorded audio. Her voice. "You poisoned him." The defense tried to frame it as bitterness, a grieving granddaughter searching for someone to blame. But the science didn't bend. A re-examination of William Morrison's preserved medical samples revealed abnormal digitalis levels, undetected at the time, clear now. The courtroom didn't gasp. Real justice rarely comes with dramatic reactions. It comes with paperwork, with procedure, with patience. When Caitlin took the stand, she didn't look at Vance at first. She focused on the judge, on the oath, on truth. "Did you intend to kill Colonel Vance during the warehouse confrontation?" the defense asked sharply. "No." "Did you hope someone would?" The question landed. She paused. The courtroom leaned in. "I hoped the truth would stop him," she said evenly, "however that happened. It wasn't perfect, but it was honest." For the first time, Vance looked at her differently. Not dismissive, not superior, just aware. He understood then. She hadn't beaten him with violence. She had outlasted him with integrity. Verdict day arrived gray and overcast. Guilty on multiple federal counts. Conspiracy, trafficking, obstruction. Second-degree murder. The sentence was long enough that he would never see freedom again. Reporters called it justice. Politicians called it accountability. Commentators called it a warning. Caitlin didn't call it anything. She drove home. Alone. Back to the desert. Back to Morrison Range. The girls were already there when she arrived, laughing now, more confident, learning how to hold steady under pressure. One of them, 16, small, nervous on the first day, approached her. "My dad says you're a hero," she said. Caitlin almost smiled. "No," she replied gently, "I'm someone who made a choice." "What kind of choice?" She looked out at the open land. "Not to let anger decide for me." The girl nodded slowly, not fully understanding yet. That was okay. Understanding comes with time. Later that evening, Nathaniel joined her by the fence line. "It's done," he said. She nodded. "Yeah. You feel different." She considered it. "Yes," she admitted, "lighter, but not because he's gone." "Then why?" "Because I don't need him anymore." That was the truth she hadn't known she was searching for. For years, Vance had lived in her head, a shadow shaping her decisions. Her anger had been anchored to him. Now the anchor was gone. Not because he was imprisoned, but because she had reclaimed herself. They stood in silence as the sun dipped low. "You ever think about going back?" Nathaniel asked. "To active duty?" She shook her head. "I served, I did my part. This is different. Training kids in the desert. Teaching them to breathe," she corrected softly. He smiled faintly. You sound like Billy. That name no longer cut. It warmed. That night, Caitlin returned to the barn alone. The rebuilt rifle hung on the wall, not as a relic of what was broken, but as proof of what could be restored. She ran her fingers along the smooth wood. It wasn't perfect. You could still see faint seams where new met old. But it was strong. So was she. Her phone buzzed. A message from Rebecca. Enrollment doubled, word spreading. Another from Garrett. Department reviewing cold cases connected to Vance's network. You started something bigger than you know. She set the phone down. Outside, wind moved gently through dry grass. She stepped out beneath the stars. For the first time in years, the sky didn't feel heavy. It felt open. She thought about the girl she had been standing in a vandalized shop, holding a broken rifle, feeling powerless. She thought about the woman in the warehouse, staring down a man who believed power excused everything. And she thought about who she was now. Not defined by revenge. Not defined by loss. Defined by choice. A choice to confront without becoming cruel. To expose without humiliating. To fight without losing herself. The desert held its quiet. And in that quiet, she understood something simple. Strength isn't proven in the moment you pull the trigger. It's proven in the moment you decide you don't have to. Sometimes justice is loud. But dignity. Dignity doesn't argue. It doesn't boast. It doesn't beg. It simply stands steady between heartbeats and refuses to break.